This is the statement that I made yesterday at St Albans Magistrates Court, and I was on trial for helping to blockade the Murdoch print press at Broxbourne more or less exactly 2 years ago. So this is what I was glad to have the opportunity to say in court. Climate chaos is a terrible reality experienced already by the world's lowest emitters, least to blame for global warming. Yet the newspapers printed at Broxbourne have so effectively and comprehensively ignored this terrible reality that until a few years ago, I had no idea of the suffering caused by big emitters like the UK. I didn't know that the 1.5 degree rise we can't now avoid is only an average over land and sea, and that for some people, like a scientist in Namibia I met on a lockdown Zoom, it means 4 or 5 degrees, because the media led by these papers doesn't tell us. I didn't understand that climate change is the symptom of inequality and injustice of all kinds, because these papers didn't explain. Still, our billionaire press makes sure almost no one knows that the latest IPCC report projects that within a short time, drought will displace 700 million people in Africa, a continent responsible for less than 4% of world emissions. However, I had read in October 2019, the Daily Mail's shocking polemic by Nigel Lawson claiming that global warming would be good for the world. And I'd seen in The Guardian a report criticising the irresponsible inaccuracy of climate coverage in the Times. I was aware that in 2017, the UK press came 40th in the world for freedom from political independence. What took me to Broxbourne on the 4th of September 2020 was a love of the truth and the humanity sacrificed by those papers in pursuit of a political agenda and scurrilous drama. I'd seen a report on 5,000 articles published 2005 to 2019 in the English-speaking world, which justifies our action by showing that the Daily Mail and Telegraph were guilty of the least accurate climate coverage. Only 3 other outlets received the same verdict, of which 2 were Murdoch's Australian papers. By concealing from the public the facts that necessitate urgent and radical action, these papers convinced that public that no such action was required, when simply informing them would have led them to demand it. An uninformed population is not in a position to make changes in their own lives and insist on big, fundamental and systemic change from government and financial institutions supporting a deadly fossil fuel industry. Of course, 2 years later, climate truth is still ignored, distorted, or sidelined by a press-led news media. But I hope that our protest created a small shift in awareness, helping to reframe that Overton window. Nonetheless, the justification for what we did is not dependent on outcome. It was the right thing to do for those suffering and dying in a crisis the press does not acknowledge, and for those endangered by hate speech in print. Many years ago, I heard a Methodist minister refer in the pulpit to the Daily Mail as the serpent in the garden. These papers, owned by the rich and powerful, who meet regularly with government ministers, have controlled the media narrative, vilified minorities, and created a toxic environment in which truth is suppressed and social division is inflamed. In 2016, I'd read in The Independent a report from the European Commission against racism and intolerance showing that the Sun and Daily Mail have stirred up hate crime. I contend that in our troubled society, the billionaire press, along with the wider media they co-opt with their agenda, is a dark, destructive force with alarming power. We can't leave resisting those to Doctor Who. I know that in the words of a district judge overheard instructing magistrates when XR trials began, these cases are not about morality. It is my firm belief that if the law has no foundation in morality, it cannot serve justice or claim to represent it. And what is justice, if not love in action? As a Quaker committed to doing what love requires of me, as a grandma whose first grandchild was born a year before this protest, and as someone who volunteered for 5 years with a charity supporting refugees, I believe that taking a stand against lies and hate was necessary and overdue, reasonable and proportionate. No harm was done, and for one day, readers had a detox opportunity. Our world in climate crisis is crying out for truth, love, peace, and justice. But the press manipulates with bread and circus trivia, scandal, bias, bile, and bigotry. Their climate silence, where the climate science should lead, thus ensuring the change we need to survive, makes them complicit in climate injustice, convicting them of a crime that's literally against humanity and other species too. I am not a criminal, but an earth protector. I wholeheartedly believe that the Jesus I know would have blocked that road with us. I was led by the science, but also by love.